there's that beautiful verse in the Sundarkam when he says, Prabhasinagara kiji sabba kaja, Hridaya raki kaushalapura raja. When he says, keep God within your heart, if you keep God within your heart, fire will become cool. Enemies will become friends. The ocean will become like a tiny puddle. All of the challenges that you have in your life, the mountains of difficulty and suffering, become as tiny as a grain of sand, and everything becomes easy. For 1,000 years, India was just emitting bhakti and love from the Guru Granth Sahib of the Sikhs, Ram Das and saints and sages, Kabir, the poetry, Tulsi Das of the Ramcharitmanas. Like, they are just lovers of God. They were just in love for 1,000 years. And even though we have the beauty of the Upanishads and this kind of like great wisdom about knowing the cosmos, or Buddhism and meditation, think about the greatness of the Buddha's teachings. Wasn't it so wonderful how he taught us about compassion and non-violence and seeing all living beings as one? But then how did India become such a devotional place with all of these temples of love and devotion? It was bhakti, that the love actually swept the whole region, and I think can sweep the whole world and should sweep the whole world with love. So I think, for us, love is the journey and love is the destination. Love is the whole practice, and all of these various practices are all, whether prescriptive or unprescriptive, are only to be in unconditional love. Hi everybody, so nice to be together again. Apologies for last week. I missed you all dearly. There was a family engagement that I couldn't get out of, so and couldn't make it back in time. But you're also all my family. We're all family now. We've been on a long journey together, so looking forward to really serving you all tonight, or this afternoon, or this morning, wherever you are. And the thing that came to me, which I really wanted to explore in more detail, was bhakti. So let's really swim in the rasa, or in that devotional thing. And there was two texts I had in mind that I wanted to explore. One was Narada Bhakti Sutras, which is a series of texts like in sutra form of Narada. But today I felt that there's another text, the Bhakti Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami. And so for those of you who might have heard of the Hare Krishna movement, a lot of the kind of root lineages of that tradition come from Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which is linked to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is considered an incarnation of Krishna. Just like they consider him to be the embodiment of Radha and Krishna combined, coming to earth just to show that love, show that devotion, and show that bliss. And Jiva Goswami is one of the great saints and scholars of that tradition, and he wrote this text called the Bhakti Sandarbha. And it's really interesting because it breaks out this idea of like, what is bhakti? Like, we hear about this word quite often, and he kind of breaks it down into two areas. The type of bhakti, there's a type of bhakti which is prescriptive, and there's a type of bhakti which is spontaneous and just arises by itself. And he calls it Vaidi, which really means prescriptive. And it's Vaidi, I think it must be linked to the Vedic ideas or Veda. But we have this idea of, certain things that we can do, certain practices that we can have, or certain ways of being. And then there's that rasa, that spontaneous form, which he calls raganuga, which is linked to raga, that music, like that thing that just comes, it happens to us, it happens with us. So before we go back to where we are in chapter 12, which is, we've spent the most time so far, and the whole of our Gita sessions in this chapter, and it's also the shortest. So, love is the sweetest, and just kind of, I always go forward and then go back and then go forward and then go back. And there's a verse, verses 6 and 7. Yetu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matparaha ananyanyeva yogena mam dhyayanti upasate tesham aham samudharta mrityu samsara sagarat bhavami nachirat partha mai avesha chetasham. O Arjuna, for those who have dedicated their actions to me, who meditate upon me with undivided attention, and whose minds dwell upon me, for them I become a swift deliverer from the ocean of life and death, from birth and death, from this ocean of material world and suffering. So when we're thinking about how does one do that, like, how do we connect? Then we can look at these prescriptive and spontaneous forms of bhakti that we might be aware of, but that Jiva Goswami kind of breaks down into various categories and ideas. So he explains there's 9 forms of prescriptive bhakti. These are good things for us to practice and be involved in our lives. And the first one is Shravana. So the Shravana means hearing. So when we listen, so this could be considered to hearing about bhakti, or hearing maybe some of the stories of the Ramayana, or the Leelas of Krishna from the Bhagavad Purana, or ideas from the Mahabharata, or hearing the Gita. It increases our bhakti through Shravana, through listening. So that is one form of devotion, is actually listening to sacred texts and letting that flow into our ears. And it's considered the first form of bhakti. One of the beautiful things, when our children were in their mother's tummy, we would play bhakti music. We would play gentle sounds, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, chants of that, just so that the baby can listen as it's being born. Or, they say the pregnant mother shouldn't go into the Mahabharata too much. Leave the Mahabharata alone, because it's too much about war and anger and violence. Pick up the Srimad Bhagavatam and the sweet stories of Krishna in Book 10 with the gopis and the love and the Leela. That is going to be much more for Shravana, so the baby can pick up love. And Jiva Goswami says, when the organs of hearing contact the words describing the name, the form, the qualities, or the pastimes of Bhagavan, the term Shravana is assigned. So when we hear about the name, when we hear the stories, and that's when we Shravana. So even just if I say the word Krishna, then Shravana is taking place. If I say Ram, Shravana, or Shiva, or any of the sacred names, Ma, He Ma, He Ma. Okay, here's a quick Leela of Chaitanya. Chaitanya was visiting somebody's house, and it was a great devotee of the Lord, and he was very fond of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he was at that time reading the Bhagavatam with great respect and affection, and he reads a passage from Book 10 where Krishna is speaking about various gopis that meet Krishna, and spoken with great devotion, these words of the Bhagavatam entered the Lord Chaitanya's ears, and as soon as he heard these words, he fell down unconscious, overcome with spiritual ecstasy. Now, maybe some of the folk listening in with their videos off are hearing me speak about Krishna's or Chaitanya and overcome with spiritual ecstasy. Maybe, I don't know, but he will be rolling on the ground in ecstasy. Oh Lord, go on, just hearing the tales of Krishna. That unrestrained tears from the Lord's eyes flooded the entire world. All of the ecstatic symptoms of like shivering and crying manifested in the Lord's person. Okay, so that's hearing sacred texts. hearing Bhakti. Number 2, Kirtana. Okay, we all know Kirtan now. You can blame Krishna Das. He's got that really spinning around the world, and many people now see Kirtan as the new yoga, or it's the new form of the in spiritual practice to be able to go and listen. But really, here we're referring to the singing, the chanting, and the recitation of names, but also the deeds of the divine. As with all of these practices, this is kind of something that singing out loud, hearing about, and rejoicing really in that. Again, being absorbed in the practice of it. This again can be, it's prescriptive, kirtana, but it can become spontaneous, can transition into spontaneous. So there is crossover with these practices. I also think that this is probably one of the easiest things to pick up. So Shravana is kind of, we just need to be there, and the words will enter our ears. We just have to listen. But here, this is the first and easiest to practice. Kirtan is when we are actually doing. And again, Mahaprabhu, if we talk about Chaitanya, Mahaprabhu danced, deeply absorbed, and people all around him were wet with tears of prema, divine love. Prabhu raised his arms saying, Bol, bol, chant, chant, and floating in ananda, which is bliss, raised the sound of Hari. Now he fell in a faint, no more breath, and suddenly stood up again and shouted, Bol, bol. Goosebumps, hair standing on end, dancing, singing, bliss. This is the description of what Kirtan can evoke. Sweat coming out of every pore of his body. I mean, Chaitanya is completely in bliss. Dancing, yeah. Okay. And then, so the third one, Smarana. Smarana means to remember. Smaran. In Punjabi or the Sikh traditions, they use that term quite a lot. Simran comes from similar word, just remembering God. Maharaj is teaching, love all, feed all, serve all, smarana. Remember God. Just keep remembering. Just keep remembering. And Jiva Goswami in the text describes a verse from the Bhagavad Purana. This is the third practice of Bhakti Yoga. Yoga has been taught as being that which the mind is withdrawn from everything else and fixed on me, the Lord, divine. So when the mind is not interested in anything else apart from remembering God, remember God, remember God, remember God, in everything. Thinking of God at all times, absorbing all of one's thoughts in God is actually the ultimate goal of this prescriptive path, and repeatedly stressed as the ultimate goal of all of the yoga of the Bhagavad Gita. So what's the goal of reading these verses again? What are we trying to achieve here? We're trying to remember God. Remember that relationship which already is there, which is closer. The Quran says Allah is closer than your jugular vein. Wow. That's quite a vivid example, but very, very close, very intimate, right here. So Smarana. Okay. The next one, Jiva doesn't really speak too much about, and it's an interesting one, which is called Padda Sevana. Padda Sevana means serving the feet of the Guru, serving the feet of the saints, serving the feet of good people, serving the feet of God. Shri Guru Charana Sarojaraja Nijamana Mukuru Sudari Barno Raghubara Bimala Jasu Joda Yoku Palachari. What does Tulsidas start the Hanuman Chalisa or the Ramcharitmanas or any of these great texts with? Taking the dust of the Guru's lotus feet and then applying it to his head. May that dust purify my whole existence. So it's serving the feet, and I think it's actually a form of humility, because anger and desire are the things that block us from realization. And if I was to talk about Hanumanji, when there's that beautiful verse in the Sundarkam when he says, Prabhasinagara kiji sabakaja, Riddhaya raki kaushalapura raja. When he says, keep God within your heart, if you keep God within your heart, fire will become cool. Enemies will become friends. The ocean will become like a tiny puddle. All of the challenges that you have in your life, the mountains of difficulty and suffering, become as tiny as a grain of sand, and everything becomes easy. And after he says this powerful statement, he becomes as tiny as a mosquito. And it happens multiple times in the Sundarban, where he then becomes tiny. And for me, I think we should take that as him becoming humble, him becoming small, him becoming lowly, like kind of in that sense of servitude. And when Ram tries to pick up Hanuman, he said, I can never repay you. Hanuman, come here, give me a hug, stand up. Hanuman stays locked to the ground on his knees, and Ram can't pick him up because he wants that separation. He wants that bhakti. He wants to stay in the mood of service. And I think here that padda sevana, when we are serving others, when we are serving saints, when we are serving the world, when we are serving Mother Nature, when we are serving God, to stay at God's feet is actually, a real definition of bhakti, and I think it's real love. It's real love to be service, to be in that service of the feet. Okay, next, archana. What does archana mean? Archana means worship. How do we practice puja in the morning? So in many Hindu homes, people will wake up in the morning, they'll have their bath or shower, and then they'll go straight to the temple, their home shrine, and then they'll do some archana, maybe light deepa, they'll offer some prayers, they'll stand before the murtis or the deities. Um, and Jiva says, worship is a faithful effort of installing, either alone or in coordination with others, my deity, the Archa, the work of providing them with gardens, groves, pleasure grounds, construction of temples, towns, service to temples, cleaning, plastering, um, designing ornaments, being free from ego and pride, um, offerings. And by this one can attain the eternal. I also think any act of offering, is archana. Any act of offering. You can consider in Catholicism, the bread and the wine that's offered. That's archana. That's that kind of practice that we're. Or when you go to a church and you light a candle on the side, which is kind of there. That is all archana. The next we have Vandana. Vandana means being respectful, offering respect. I guess it overlaps again with many of the other forms, but again, Vandana means offering respect, being respectful, being compassionate, having humility. Um, he comments that there are some bhaktas who simply feel unworthy of directly serving the deity, and these prefer to meditate on him and engage in practices of vandana, respectfulness. The humble bhakta perceives Ishvara's compassion in all situations and becomes blissful. So not a lot is said on this, but I think that it's kind of being um, linked to kindness, linked to humility, respectfulness. As we know from that chapter 12, which we were reading a couple of weeks ago, a lot of it is on human values. So you can't have bhakti without humanity. You can't have love if you are not kind, without compassion. That's the very essence of love, very essence of bhakti. Vandana, offering respect. I guess you could also think of um, it overlapping with pad seva from a very direct basis. That if you've ever been to a temple and you might see somebody lying flat forward on the ground, danda pranam, fully extended in full length. That is like, offering everything you have, lying flat on the floor, face down. I, I was actually once in Govardhan Hill, and I wanted to circumambulate this hill, which is said that Krishna lifted once, and it's near Vrindavan. And Govardhan Hill is a beautiful place where lots of people circumambulate the whole hill and they go around it barefoot. But I saw one elderly, saintly person, looked very humble, very poor. And every day he says he goes round the hill. It takes him hours. But he lies flat on the ground, full length, prays, then stands up, and then goes again, and then goes again until he circumambulates the whole hill. And it's huge. It takes probably hours for him to do. It's covered in dust. And, you know, when I was there, I was so excited to be in this place. I really loved it. And I was going to take a rock just to place in my temple at home and to keep there and say, oh, I'll take a piece of Govardhan with me. And he said to me, I was just talking to him, and he said, no, you shouldn't take the rock. This is Govardhan Hill. It's a sacred place. Please leave the rock there. I said, okay, why though? He said, you stay here. If you're truly devoted, come with me and do this. And he said, you can stay here and we can do this every day. So such was his devotion where he said, okay, I could just live here and just keep going around the hill. You don't need to go anywhere else. You don't need to take that air from truly offering deep respect. Okay, next one, Dasya. We know this name. We've heard of Ram Das, Krishna Das, Hanuman Das. What does it mean, Dasya? What is this word, Dasya? Dasya is servant, to be a servant of God, to be a servant of the servant of the servant of the servant, and the lineage just keeps going. Again, offering oneself or considering oneself to be a servant of God. Uddhava, one of the great devotees of Krishna, says, we are your servants. We partake of your remnants. That means, if we offer something to God, we only eat which God gives us. The garlands, the ointments, the clothes, the decorations, and the food enjoyed by you, through that we will surpass Maya. So everything he eats is an offering of God. Imagine that. That food, he just considers everything to be given by God. Just like the birds are taken care of. The Dasya, Bhava, that feeling of servant of God. And, Ram Das, when he gave me that name, Hanuman Das, I asked him at that time, why have you always used Ram Das? And it reminds me, he said, it reminds me that I am a servant of God. That's my work. Because Richard Alpert had a big brand. He could have continued to make use of that, but he said, no, I'm a servant of God. And when other people call me, they shout, servant of God, come here. And then I remember again. So Smarana kicks in. So actually the name is also part of that bhakti, that practice. It all links back to love and devotion. So Dasya Bhava. Next is Sakhya. Sakhya is Maitri. Means friendship. Be friend of God. Doesn't need to be a distant man with a beard sitting on a cloud somewhere. God is our friend, our most intimate friend. Arjuna sees Krishna because he's a friend of Krishna. He's close to Krishna. We hear that all the time. As with Dasya servitorship, the practice of Sakhya friendship involves a state of mind, bhava, which in general terms, says Diva, entails wishing someone's well-being. In Bhakti, it's really having that friendship, having that love, having that emotion. And Sakhya, as per this example, is something that is you see the good fortune. Oh, see the good fortune of Nanda, the cowherder, and the residents of Raj. Their friendship is the supreme bliss, their eternal absolute Brahman. Friendship is Brahman. Connection, satsang, having that friendship, that's where we feel together. We are actually expanding our consciousness to realize divinity through friendship. When we all come together, when we sing together, when we chant together, we recite together, and we serve together. The friends of the infallible divine who are peaceful, equanimous, pure, and affectionate to all beings easily attain God's abode. Then we have Atma Nivedana. Atma is our soul, our self, our innermost self. Nivedana, self-surrender. Nivedana is to surrender to the self within. So understanding that divinity is within your heart and looking in that way. And then, I'm going to skip further on quickly, but then he goes on to describe bhakti to dharma, like in the context of dharma, which we all know and have discussed much. Bhakti in devotion to jnana, knowledge, so more meditative forms, knowledge forms. So I think he does include those within the context of bhakti, but we have to look at dharma slightly differently here. So when I describe dharma to people, particularly when they come in contact with Godharmic, I'm really just talking about the dharma of humanity to serve other living beings. It's just compassion, purely. I don't really describe it in the sense of bhakti so much, but personally, for my own practice and for our practice and from the context of the Gita, it's a form of bhakti. So that's my inner practice, that serving others is devotion to God, is the practice. And so the goal of Dharma, which leads to liberation, is not compatible with any material gain. The goal of Dharma, which is devoted to the One, the Supreme Being, is not taught in the sacred texts as desire for material attainment. In fact, the purpose of desire is not to fulfill gratification of the senses, but to fulfill as much as necessary to sustain life. And the purpose of this life is to inquire into truth and not to engage in adding material gain or karma. So here, what I want to say is that Dharma should be seen as bhakti. It is love, because you are loving other living beings through your service to them. And that is when we see it through the lens of bhakti. Okay, so we have bhakti mixed with karma, bhakti mixed with dharma, bhakti mixed with jnana, knowledge. So that will make up the prescriptive forms of bhakti. Now the other form is really incredible. It's non-prescriptive. It's spontaneous. Like, have you ever just got these tingles and like in you're practicing or you're somewhere and you just feel, wow, so connected to the universe in a different way, like that you just can't describe with your mind? That is spontaneous feeling. That is an arising of something that you can't describe easily with words, and that is almost God doing it to you rather than you practicing something that you're trying to achieve. It just happens. It's spontaneous. And there's this beautiful story which is illustrated in the Bhagavata Purana, of Yashoda, who is Krishna's mother. So remember, God is not just the father up there. He is the child. He is the naughty child. He is the lover. He is the friend. He is the all things. And Yashoda is a typical mother in a village taking care of her baby. She doesn't know who Krishna is. She just thinks that this is my child running around. And Yashoda thinks that Krishna has eaten dirt. Some of you may have come across this story. Is a beautiful image. If you search Yashoda and Krishna eating dirt, and it's just a mum looking in her child's mouth to try and get dirt out. And she's like, my God, my son's eaten dirt. Let me clean his mouth. So Yashoda's trying to clean Krishna's mouth, and she's looking in there. And as she looks in there, boom, she sees the entire cosmos. She sees all living beings and entities and the entire world and every god and goddess that they worship and everything in her baby's mouth. And then she's like stunned. And as she's looking in this child's mouth, Krishna's playfully laughing and, kind of just being this small child. And then she's like, she can never be the same again, you know. And because the Maya has been removed, the illusion of reality has been removed from her eyes, and she's just stunned there, and she's there just kind of like Arjuna when he sees the Vishvarupa earlier in the Gita. He's stunned. He can't bear it. It's too much. And then Krishna, out of love, because she's had this spontaneous episode of enlightenment, really. She's achieved enlightenment at that moment. He removes the enlightenment. And why does Krishna remove the enlightenment? So she can serve him again. So he can go back and sit on her lap as a baby and as a child. And so the Bhagavad Purana illustrates this essential role. And Yashoda looks into her mouth to see if he has eaten dirt, but sees the entire universe there in 10. In Book 10, it describes this. Becoming enlightened as to the real nature of her own self and Krishna, she finds her inability to interact with him as mother is immediately shattered and instead begins to bow down at his feet. Krishna doesn't want that, spouting lofty Vedantic rhetoric and eulogizing him as the supreme being. Krishna immediately removes the Yogamaya, erasing her memory of the event. So she again can place him on her lap, nurse him, and continue her motherly duties in pure love, thinking of him as nothing more than an adorable infant dependent upon her care. How lovely. This divine illusion, of course, is appropriate for the perfected souls who have attained God in these ways. Do not consider Krishna is the father's offspring. He is the Ishvara, or he is all Atmans, the supreme, imperishable being. But he has concealed this majesty in the form of an ordinary human being by his Yogamaya. I guess this form of bhakti is really about having that bhava, or being in that feeling, emotion, that can be in every aspect of our life. So what I would say really about chapter 12 and what we're exploring in Bhakti is it's not just about doing a thing, offering a candle or placing offerings into the fire. It's, can that practice become a form of our entering into the feeling of love? Whether that's the archana, the temple worship, or the offerings into the fire, or the chanting of the name, or remembering the name, or even serving the homeless or feeding the poor. Can that be this blissful feeling that, oh, I'm doing this service of God right now and remembering him through that practice? and then it all becomes bhakti. And we come back to that verse in 6 and 7. Yetu sarvani karmani, all the actions are dedicated upon me, meditating upon me, undivided attention, whose minds dwell upon me. I become a swift deliverer from the ocean of rebirth and death. Fix your mind on me alone. Direct your intelligence towards me, and thereafter you will dwell upon me. You will dwell in me. Of this there is no doubt. O Dhananjayaha, if you are unable to fix your, we read these verses, if you can't fix your mind upon me, then practice yoga. If you can't practice yoga, then dedicate your actions to me. And if you can't do this, renounce the results of the actions and become self-controlled. So Krishna's showing that if you can't be devoted, then at least don't harm others. You know, if you can't be love and live within God, at least control your anger and desire. Reduce the impact of the karma that will be generated through this action. Knowledge is better than practice, but better than knowledge is meditation. But better than renunciation of the fruits of action, for renunciation leads directly to peace. Advesta sarvabhutanam maitra karuna evacha nirmamo nirankaraha samadukha sukha kshami. We read this verse last week or the week before. The yogi who is without hostility, who is friendly, compassionate to all creatures, who lives without a sense of ego or ownership, who is equal, samadukha, equal in pain and pleasure, who is patient, ever satisfied and self-controlled, who is resolved in firm, and who is intellect and mind are dedicated to me, such a person is my devotee and is dear to me. Again, you know, we've spent a lot of time in this session exploring bhakti practices. I wanted to go back a little bit and kind of really go into various types of bhakti. But after explaining that, Krishna goes back into human values, really spends. It's interesting, isn't it, that the majority of verses in the bhakti chapter on devotion, Krishna's talking about human values. Compassion, not hating others, not being overly desireful, being equanimous, one who is equal to friend and enemy alike, who is equal in honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, who is free from attachment, to whom criticism and praise are the same, ever silent, satisfied with what comes of its own accord, who is without attachment to home, and whose thoughts are fixed on me, such a person is a devotee, and who is dear to me. Indeed, those who taking shelter of this immortal wisdom, which dharm amrityam, the amrita means nectar, nectarful wisdom, ones who take shelter of this nectar of which I have spoken, who are full of faith and intent on me, are exceedingly dear to me. His final words of the chapter. Ye tu dharmyamritam. So the amrit, the nectar of dharma, who want that, those people are very dear to me. Bhaktasti eva me priyaha. They're priya, they're beloved to me. But he uses the word shraddhana, the ones who are faithful and devoted towards me. They come to me. Take shelter of this immortal wisdom. I think we could spend a whole year in chapter 12. And I think for 1,000 years, India was just emitting bhakti and love from the Guru Granth Sahib of the Sikhs, Ram Das, and saints and sages, Kabir, the poetry, Tulsi Das of the Ramcharitmanas. Like, they are just lovers of God. They were just in love for 1,000 years. And even though we have the beauty of the Upanishads and this kind of like great wisdom about knowing the cosmos or Buddhism and meditation, think about the greatness of the Buddha's teachings. Wasn't it so wonderful how he taught us about compassion and non-violence and seeing all living beings as one? But then how did India become such a devotional place with all of these temples of love and devotion? It was bhakti, that the love actually swept the whole region, and I think can sweep the whole world and should sweep the whole world with love. So I think, for us, love is the journey and love is the destination. Love is the whole practice, and all of these various practices are all, whether prescriptive or unprescriptive, are only to be in love, be in unconditional love. So I think I can pause there, and we can speak a little bit about bhakti. We've completed the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, um, and we'll go into more jnana wisdom in chapter 13. But I thought this was a really special chapter, chapter 12 of love and devotion. Thank you, everybody. Siyavara Ramachandra Bhagavan ki jai. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Love to all. Ram Ram. Bye.